On CP3-2 Part 1, we're going to be using algebra to write equations for perpendicular bisectors. So we're going to quickly review circumcenters, centers, and orthocenters. Have all of this information. Hopefully that's all review. When we're trying to find circumcenters, we need to use the perpendicular bisectors. So today we're going to practice writing equations for perpendicular bisectors given two endpoints. Tomorrow we'll take it a step further. We'll set two perpendicular bisectors equal and find where they meet, because that will give us that point on a coordinate plane. An incenter, the only way we could find an incenter is if we got out a compass and a straight edge and actually found the angle bisector, which is something we did this fall. It is not something we will continue to do, so you don't need to ever worry about finding an incenter. And with an orthocenter, we could find it by using the opposite vertex and the perpendicular slope, but since there's nothing special about orthocenters, we will not be finding those either. So today's kind of a part one of how to find a circumcenter. Tomorrow we'll actually practice finding them. So recall that a circumcenter requires three perpendicular bisectors. The perpendicular part tells me, hey, use the negative reciprocal for your slope. And the bisector part says, hey, find the midpoint. And if I use the midpoint and the negative reciprocal, I'm guaranteed to find a perpendicular bisector. So today you're going to need a few things. You're going to need to remember your slope formula, which is y2 over y1 over x2 minus x1, or change in y over change in x, or you can think of it as rise over run. Your midpoint formula, which could be x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2, but it's really just the average of your x's and average of your y's. And you're going to take both of those things and plug it into point slope form. So we're going to practice this. The first thing I'm going to need is the slope of the side, then I'll need perpendicular slope, and then I'll need the midpoint. So from 8 to 0, I'm going down 8. From 6 to 10, I'm going up 4. So my original slope is negative 2. I can take that to find my perpendicular slope. The negative reciprocal of negative 2 is positive 1/2. Now I'm finding the midpoint. So 10 plus 6 is 16. Cut in half is 8. 8 plus 0 is 8. Cut in half is 4. I'm going to plug in this slope and this point into point slope form. So I get y minus 4 equals 1/2 times x minus 8. And I don't need to clean it up or distribute at all. I can leave my answer just like that. We're going to do the same thing now with triangles, and we're going to do this multiple times. So I'm going to start with AB, BC, and AC. And then I'm going to write out the things that I'll need. I need my slope, my perpendicular slope, my midpoint. And I'm going to copy that because I'm going to use it a whole bunch today. I'm going to change colors just so my work's a little bit clearer. So the slope from A to B, my y value is increasing by 2. My x value is increasing by 6. So that slope is 1/3. That means my perpendicular slope is negative 3. The midpoint then, 4 plus negative 2 is positive 2. Cut in half is 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. Cut in half is 2. I'm using my perpendicular slope and my midpoint. So I get y minus 2 equals negative 3 times x minus 1. I'll do the same thing for BC now. The slope between B and C, my y value is going down 2. My x value is going down 8. So this slope is 1/4. The perpendicular slope then must be negative 4. My midpoint is the average of those. 4 plus negative 4 is 0. Cut in half is still 0. 3 plus 1 is 4. Cut in half is 2. I use my perpendicular slope and my midpoint and throw it into point slope form. So I'll get y minus 2 equals negative 4 times x minus 0. And it feels silly to write the minus 0, but in your checkpoint today, it's fill in the blanks. So write it anyways. Okay, and then the last one I have to solve for is AC. This time, my y value is going up 0. My x value is going down 2. So my slope is 0, which means my perpendicular slope is undefined. And remember that anytime I have a line whose slope is undefined, it will start x equals and then a number. To find that number, I'm going to take the midpoint of A and C, and the x value of that is negative 3. The y value is still 1. This negative 3, that x value, is what x must equal. So this is the equation of the perpendicular bisector. And you will not see that on today's checkpoint, but you could see something like it on tomorrow's checkpoint. So don't panic if you do get something like that. All right, we're going to do a few more examples. This time we are solving for DE, EF, and DF. And I'm still going to find my slope, perpendicular slope, and midpoint. So I'm going to list those things out, and I'm going to list the sides that I'm solving for. So I'm going to start by solving for the slope between D and E. My y value is going up 12, and my x value is going up 4, so that slope is 3, which means my perpendicular slope is negative 1 over 3. My midpoint then, 0 plus 4 is 4, cut in half is 2. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0, cut in half is still 0. I use this midpoint and that slope in point slope form. So I'll have y minus 0 equals negative 1/3 times x minus 2. Now I'm going to do the same thing for E and F. My y value is going down 6. My x value is going up 8. So that's negative 3/4, which means my perpendicular slope will be positive 4/3. My midpoint then, 4 plus 12 is 16, cut in half is 8. 6 plus 0 is 6, cut in half is 3. Use your perpendicular slope and your midpoint to write an equation. So I have y minus 3 equals 4/3 x minus 8. Lastly, solving for the side DF, my y value is going up 6. My x value is going up 12. So that is 1/2. The perpendicular slope then is negative 2. The midpoint between those, halfway between 0 and 12, is 6. Halfway between negative 6 and 0 is negative 3. I'm using my perpendicular slope and my midpoint to write an equation. So I'll get y plus 3 equals negative 2 times x minus 6. All right, this last problem, we're doing the exact same thing with 3 different points. So again, I'm going to paste those exact same 3 things that I need. And then I'm going to list off the sides that I'll need to find. I need to find GH, HJ, and GJ. I'll start with GH. My y value is going up 5. My x value is going up 4. That means my perpendicular slope will be negative 4/5. My midpoint then, halfway between negative 4 and 0 is negative 2. Halfway between 0 and 5, I'm going to call it 5/2. I'm using this slope and this point to write an equation. So I have y minus 5/2 equals negative 4/5 times x plus 2, because minus a negative 2. Do the same thing for HJ. My slope is going down 8 and up 10. So I'm going to call that negative 4/5, which means my perpendicular slope will be positive 5/4. My midpoint then is 5, 3, 1. Using this point and this slope, I have y minus 1 equals positive 5/4 times x minus 5. The last side I need to solve for is GJ. My y value is going down 3. My x values are going up 14, which means my perpendicular slope is 14/3. Kind of a gross fraction there, sorry. 10 minus 4 is 6. Cut in half is 3. Halfway between 0 and 3, or negative 3 rather, is negative 3/2 or negative 1.5. I use my perpendicular slope and my midpoint to write an equation. Y minus a negative 3/2 becomes a plus 3/2 equals 14/3 times x minus 3.